There comes a moment in every life when continuing the same way becomes more painful than changing, when staying comfortable feels heavier than stepping into the unknown. And that moment is not a coincidence. It is a signal, a quiet but powerful invitation telling you that it is time to reset, not because you failed, not because you are behind, but because growth demands a new version of you. And 2026 is not just another year on the calendar. It is a clean page waiting for a different story. Your story, written with intention instead of regret. You do not need permission to start over. You do not need approval from the past. And you do not need to carry old mistakes into a new season. Because the truth is simple and undeniable. Every great transformation begins the moment someone decides they are no longer available for the life that drains them, and instead chooses a life that aligns with who they are becoming, not who they used to be. Resetting your life does not mean erasing everything. It means recalibrating. It means adjusting your direction before you waste another year walking a road that does not lead where your heart wants to go. It means pausing long enough to hear your own thoughts again in a world that constantly demands your attention, your energy, and your time, without ever asking if it deserves them. As you listen to these words, understand this deeply. You are not late, you are not broken, and you are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience, from lessons learned the hard way, from moments that shaped you, strengthened you, and prepared you for this exact decision. The decision to restart with clarity instead of chaos, with purpose instead of pressure, and with discipline instead of motivation alone. 2026 is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters. It is about removing distractions that feel productive but lead nowhere. It is about releasing habits that once protected you but now limit you. And it is about rebuilding your daily life around actions that compound quietly into extraordinary results over time. You may feel tired, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually tired of trying to keep up, tired of explaining yourself, tired of postponing your own goals for later. But later is a dangerous place, because later slowly turns into never. And the most powerful decision you can make today is to stop negotiating with your potential. This audiobook is not here to hype you up for a moment. It is here to rewire how you think, how you choose, and how you show up every single day, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. Because real change does not happen in public. It happens in silence, in repetition, in commitment to the small actions that most people overlook. Imagine waking up each day in 2026 with a calm sense of direction, not rushed, not scattered, not reacting to life, but responding with intention, knowing what deserves your energy and what no longer does, knowing that your habits are finally aligned with your goals, and that your future is no longer something you hope for, but something you are actively building. Resetting your life begins with one powerful truth. You cannot create a new future with an old mindset. And that is why today is not about fixing everything at once. It is about deciding who you are willing to become, and then choosing actions that support that identity again and again until consistency replaces doubt and confidence replaces fear. As this audiobook continues, allow yourself to slow down, let the noise fade, let the past loosen its grip, and let these words settle into your subconscious, because transformation does not require force. It requires alignment, and alignment begins the moment you choose to listen, not just to this audiobook, but to yourself. You are not here by accident. You pressed play because something inside you is ready to restart, ready to refocus, ready to rebuild. And as you stay with this journey, hour by hour, thought by thought, choice by choice, you will realize that resetting your life is not an event, it is a process. And that process starts now. You don't need to rush this process, because rushing is what created exhaustion in the first place, and exhaustion clouds judgment while clarity restores power. So as you continue listening, allow yourself to slow your breathing, relax your shoulders, and recognize that this reset is not about urgency. It is about direction, because speed without direction only takes you faster toward burnout. But intention takes you exactly where you need to go. Most people believe their life will change when circumstances change, when money improves, when time opens up, when someone finally understands them. But the truth is far simpler and far more empowering. Your life changes the moment your standards change, the moment you decide what you will no longer tolerate from yourself, from others, and from the patterns that quietly steal your future while pretending to keep you comfortable. A reset begins internally, long before it becomes visible on the outside. It starts with the thoughts you allow to repeat, the conversations you keep having in your mind, the excuses you rehearse without realizing they are becoming beliefs. And in 2026, the greatest upgrade you can give yourself is not more information, but better filters. Filters that protect your focus, your energy, and your peace. You don't need to compare your journey to anyone else's, because comparison distorts perspective. It makes you feel behind when you are simply on a different path, and it convinces you to chase goals that were never meant for you. A true restart requires honesty. Honesty about what you actually want. Not what looks impressive, not what others expect, but what genuinely aligns with your values and your vision of a meaningful life. There is a quiet strength in choosing simplicity, in choosing fewer goals with deeper commitment, in choosing habits you can sustain instead of routines that look perfect but collapse under pressure. Because discipline is not about intensity, it is about consistency. And consistency is built through systems that support you on hard days, not just good ones. As you move forward into this year, understand that motivation will come and go, but identity remains. And the fastest way to reset your life is to decide who you are becoming and then act in alignment with that identity even when it feels uncomfortable. Because discomfort is often a sign that growth is happening, not that something is wrong. You may have tried before. You may have started strong and faded out. You may carry frustration about unfinished plans and broken promises to yourself. But those experiences are not proof that you can't change. They are proof that you learned what doesn't work, and wisdom is simply experience properly processed, not ignored. A powerful reset includes forgiveness. Forgiveness for past versions of yourself who did the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. Holding on to guilt does not keep you accountable, it keeps you stuck. And the only way forward is to release the weight of self-judgment and replace it with responsibility. Responsibility that says, I cannot change yesterday, but I can choose differently today. Every habit you repeat is a vote for the person you are becoming, and most lives are shaped not by dramatic decisions, but by small daily choices made consistently over time. The decision to get enough rest, to protect your mornings, to limit distractions, to speak to yourself with respect. These are not minor details. They are the foundation of a life that feels stable, focused, and intentional. As this audiobook unfolds, you will begin to notice subtle shifts, not sudden breakthroughs, but quiet awareness. Awareness of how often you rush, how often you avoid discomfort, how often you delay what matters most. And this awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to empower you, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. 2026 is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be present. Present with your choices, present with your habits, present with the reality that your future is being shaped right now in ordinary moments, through ordinary actions, repeated consistently, without applause. There is something deeply powerful about deciding that this year will be different. Not because you say it, but because you live it. Because you design your days around what actually moves your life forward. Because you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start honoring the present one. Because you understand that confidence is built through action, not thought. If you feel resistance rising as you listen, that is normal. Resistance appears whenever change approaches, because the mind prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar growth. But you are not here to stay the same. You are here to evolve. And evolution always requires letting go of who you were to make space for who you are becoming. Stay with this process. Let these words guide you gently but firmly, because this is not about pressure. It is about permission. Permission to reset your pace, your priorities, and your perspective. Permission to build a life that feels aligned instead of exhausting. Permission to make 2026 the year you finally choose yourself without guilt. And as you continue listening, remember to subscribe to the Motivational Audiobook Spot, because transformation is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice, and surrounding yourself with the right messages reinforces the direction you are choosing. This is not just an audiobook. It is a commitment to your future self. As you continue forward, it becomes important to understand that a true restart is not built on dramatic promises or emotional spikes. It is built on quiet decisions made when no one is watching. Decisions that feel small in the moment but powerful in the long run. Because your life is not shaped by what you intend to do someday. It is shaped by what you consistently do today. One of the greatest illusions people carry into a new year is the belief that clarity arrives first and action follows. But in reality, clarity is created through movement, through doing, through experimenting, adjusting, and staying engaged with your life instead of standing on the sidelines waiting to feel ready, because readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision reinforced by repetition. A reset in 2026 means you stop asking yourself how to feel motivated and start asking yourself how to build systems that support you even when motivation disappears. Systems that make progress inevitable instead of optional. Systems that remove friction from good habits and add friction to the habits that keep you stuck, because willpower is unreliable, but structure is powerful. Pay attention to your environment, because your environment quietly shapes your behavior more than your intentions ever will. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, the way your space is organized, all of it sends signals to your brain about who you are and what is expected of you. And if you want a new life, you must design an environment that supports that identity. This does not require perfection or extreme change. It requires awareness and alignment. Small adjustments that compound, like choosing calm over chaos in the morning, choosing depth over distraction, choosing fewer commitments with higher standards. Because focus is not about doing more, it is about eliminating what no longer serves your direction. You may notice that as you begin to reset your habits, some people may not understand. Not because you are wrong, but because change challenges comfort, both yours and theirs, and growth often creates distance before it creates respect. But you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to build a life that feels true to you. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment. But real discipline is self-respect in action. It is choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term relief. It is honoring the promises you make to yourself, especially the small ones. Because every kept promise builds trust, and trust in yourself is the foundation of confidence. As 2026 unfolds, there will be days when progress feels invisible, when effort does not immediately reward you, when old patterns try to pull you back into familiar routines. And in those moments, remember this: consistency beats intensity every time, and showing up imperfectly is infinitely more powerful than waiting for the perfect conditions. A reset also means redefining success, not as constant productivity or endless achievement, but as alignment between your values and your actions. Success is waking up without dread, moving through your day with intention, and knowing that even if progress is slow, it is real, because it is rooted in habits that last. You are allowed to change your mind, to outgrow goals that no longer resonate, to release versions of success that were built on comparison instead of fulfillment, because growth is not linear, and resetting your life includes giving yourself permission to evolve without guilt. Notice how often your mind tries to rush ahead into the future or pull you back into the past. Anxiety lives in the future, regret lives in the past, but power lives in the present. And the more you anchor yourself in what you can control right now, the more stable and focused your life becomes. This audiobook is meant to be revisited, listened to while you work, while you rest, while you reflect, because repetition reinforces identity, and the more you hear these messages, the more naturally they become part of how you think, choose, and act, shaping your days without force. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to support the Motivational Audiobook Spot by liking this audiobook and staying connected, because the content you surround yourself with becomes the voice you hear when challenges arise, and choosing the right voice matters. You are not behind, you are becoming, and becoming takes time, patience, and commitment. Not dramatic change, but steady alignment. As this journey continues, it becomes clear that the most important work you will do in 2026 is not visible to anyone else. It happens in the moments when you choose patience over impulse, when you choose progress over perfection, and when you choose to stay consistent even when the results are not immediately obvious, because real change does not announce itself, it reveals itself over time. You begin to understand that focus is not something you find, it is something you protect. Every distraction you allow is a decision. Every interruption you entertain is a trade, and the question is always the same. Is this worth the life you are trying to build? Because attention is your most valuable resource, and once spent, it cannot be recovered. A true reset requires boundaries, not walls, but clear limits that define what belongs in your life and what does not. Boundaries around your time, your energy, your availability, and even your thoughts. Because saying no to what drains you is often the most powerful way to say yes to what matters. You may notice resistance when you start protecting your focus, especially from parts of yourself that are used to distraction as comfort, but discomfort is not danger, it is simply a sign that you are breaking patterns that once felt familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for safety, even when it holds you back. One of the most effective ways to refocus your life is to simplify your goals. Complexity creates confusion, and confusion creates inaction, but clarity creates momentum. Choose a few priorities that truly matter and give them the time, attention, and consistency they deserve, because success is rarely about doing everything. It is about doing the right things well. As you reset your routines, remember that mornings set the tone for the entire day, not because they need to be perfect, but because they create direction. A calm, intentional start sends a message to your mind that you are in control, that you are choosing your day instead of reacting to it, and that sense of control builds confidence quietly but steadily. Equally important is how you end your days. Reflection replaces regret. Taking a moment to acknowledge effort, to notice progress, to reset your mind before rest. This is not indulgence, it is maintenance, because a rested mind is a focused mind, and burnout is often the result of ignoring recovery, not working too hard. A reset also means redefining your relationship with failure. Failure is not a verdict, it is feedback. Information that shows you where adjustments are needed, not proof that you should stop. And when you view setbacks as part of the process instead of the end of it, resilience becomes natural. In 2026, choose to measure progress by consistency rather than outcomes. Outcomes fluctuate. Consistency compounds. And the person who keeps showing up, even on low-energy days, always outpaces the person who relies on bursts of motivation followed by long pauses. You will not always feel inspired, but you can always choose discipline, And discipline does not mean forcing yourself. It means honoring your future self enough to act in alignment with what you know matters, even when the present moment offers easier options. As this audiobook continues to guide you, let these words become a steady companion, not a push, but a reminder that you are capable of change, that you are allowed to design your life intentionally, and that resetting your life is not about escaping the past. It is about building a future you are proud to step into. If this message is helping you realign your mindset, take a moment to stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook spot, because long-form motivation works best when it becomes part of your daily environment, reinforcing focus, discipline, and calm through repetition. This is your time to rebuild with clarity, not pressure, with patience, not panic, and with purpose, not comparison. And as you continue listening, you are already doing the work, quietly, steadily, effectively. As the hours pass and these words continue to flow, something subtle begins to happen inside you. Not a sudden burst of energy, not a dramatic emotional high, but a steady settling. A sense that you are no longer fighting yourself, that the noise is slowly fading, and in its place, clarity is taking root, because a true reset feels calm, not chaotic. You start to recognize that much of what once felt overwhelming was never about the amount of work, but about the lack of direction, doing many things without knowing which ones truly mattered. And now, with each moment of focused listening, your mind is learning to prioritize, to distinguish between what feels urgent and what is genuinely important. This is where refocus becomes a daily practice, not a one-time decision, each day offering a fresh opportunity to choose presence over distraction, depth over speed, and intention over impulse. Because focus is not about eliminating all distractions. It is about returning to what matters faster each time you drift. A powerful reset also reshapes how you relate to time. Instead of seeing time as something you are always running out of, you begin to see it as something you invest, and every investment carries a return. When you invest time in rest, you gain clarity. When you invest time in learning, you gain leverage, and when you invest time in aligned action, you gain momentum. You are not required to fix everything in 1 year or even in 1 season. Growth respects rhythm. It unfolds in cycles of effort and recovery, and honoring that rhythm protects you from burnout while keeping you moving forward, because sustainable progress is built on balance, not extremes. As 2026 continues, you will face moments where old habits try to resurface, moments when comfort calls louder than commitment. And in those moments, pause and remember why you chose this reset. Not to impress, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to create a life that feels grounded, focused, and meaningful to you. Identity plays a crucial role here, because when your actions align with who you believe you are, discipline becomes natural. Instead of saying you are trying to change, begin to act as someone who already values focus, consistency, and self-respect. And over time, those actions reinforce that identity without force. A reset also deepens your relationship with silence. Silence is where reflection happens, where creativity emerges, where intuition speaks, and in a world that constantly fills every quiet moment with noise, choosing silence is an act of strength, not avoidance. As you listen, let these moments of calm remind you that rest is not a reward for productivity. It is a requirement for clarity, and protecting your energy is not selfish, it is strategic, because a focused, rested mind makes better decisions, and better decisions shape better lives. You may notice that your confidence begins to shift, not becoming louder, but becoming steadier, grounded in the knowledge that you are showing up consistently, that you are no longer relying on external validation to feel capable, and that inner stability becomes a source of quiet power. If these words resonate with you, allow them to become part of your daily routine. Listen while you work, while you walk, while you unwind, because repetition builds belief and belief shapes behavior over time. This is why long-form audiobooks are powerful. They reprogram gently, without pressure. Remember to stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook spot, because the messages you hear repeatedly become the mindset you carry into challenges, and choosing supportive content is one of the simplest yet most effective ways to reinforce your reset. As this reset deepens, you begin to realize that rebuilding your life is less about adding new things and more about removing what no longer fits: old narratives, outdated expectations, unnecessary pressure, and the constant need to be everywhere at once, because simplicity creates space, and space allows growth to breathe. You start paying closer attention to the stories you tell yourself, stories about who you are, what you are capable of, and what the future holds. And you recognize that many of these stories were written during moments of doubt, not truth, and rewriting them is one of the most powerful parts of this restart. A focused life is not a restrictive life. It is a free one, free from constant reaction, free from overwhelm, free from the guilt of unfinished priorities. Because when you choose clarity, you are no longer pulled in every direction. You are moving forward with intention. This year is not about proving anything. It is about aligning everything. Aligning your habits with your goals, aligning your time with your values, aligning your actions with the person you want to become, and alignment creates a sense of peace that motivation alone never can. You may notice that as your inner world becomes calmer, your outer world begins to respond, not immediately, but gradually. Opportunities feel clearer, decisions feel simpler, and your energy feels more stable. Because clarity changes how you show up, and how you show up changes the results you create. A reset also transforms how you approach challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as interruptions, you begin to see them as part of the process, signals that growth is happening, and when challenges arise, you respond with adjustment rather than frustration, knowing that resilience is built through response, not avoidance. One of the most important habits you can develop in 2026 is reflection, taking a few moments regularly to check in with yourself, to ask what is working, what is draining, and what needs to change. Because awareness keeps you aligned, and alignment keeps you moving forward without burnout. As you simplify your life, you may notice more mental space, more creative energy, and more patience. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become clearer. And clarity reduces friction in everything you do. This audiobook is designed to be a steady guide, not a loud voice, a presence you can return to whenever you need recalibration, because resets are not permanent states. They are ongoing practices, and returning to alignment is part of the journey. If you find value in this message, remember to support the Motivational Audiobook spot by subscribing and staying connected, because consistency in what you consume supports consistency in how you live, and the right environment makes change sustainable. You are building something quietly powerful, a life defined not by urgency, but by intention, not by noise, but by focus, and not by pressure, but by purpose. As you move further into this reset, you begin to understand that discipline is not about controlling every moment. It is about choosing direction again and again, especially when life feels uncertain, because direction gives meaning to effort, and effort without meaning quickly turns into exhaustion. You stop asking yourself how to feel inspired and start asking yourself how to stay aligned with your priorities, your values, and the kind of life you want to wake up to each day, because alignment removes the internal conflict that drains energy more than any workload ever could. A rebuilt life is supported by routines that feel grounding rather than restrictive. Routines that give structure to your days while still allowing flexibility. because structure creates freedom. It frees your mind from constant decision-making and allows you to focus on what truly matters. You begin to notice that many distractions are not about entertainment. They are about avoidance. Avoidance of stillness, avoidance of discomfort, avoidance of facing what needs attention. And as you become more comfortable with presence, the urge to escape gradually loses its grip. In 2026, one of the most powerful choices you can make is to stay present with discomfort long enough to learn from it. Discomfort often carries information. It shows you where growth is needed, where boundaries are missing, and where alignment is off. And listening to it calmly changes everything. As you continue listening, let these words reinforce a simple truth. You do not need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You only need to make slightly better choices consistently, because small improvements repeated daily create transformations that feel almost effortless in hindsight. You may notice a shift in how you speak to yourself, a softer, more constructive inner voice replacing criticism, because self-respect grows when you treat yourself as someone worth caring for. And a supportive inner dialogue strengthens discipline far more effectively than harsh judgment ever could. A reset also reshapes your relationship with success. Success becomes less about external recognition and more about internal stability, about knowing that you are acting in integrity with your values, even when no one is watching, even when progress feels slow. As days turn into weeks, consistency begins to feel natural, not forced. Habits start to anchor your days, and you realize that what once required effort now feels automatic, because repetition builds identity, and identity sustains behavior. If you ever feel yourself drifting, returning to old patterns, remember that drifting is not failure. It is feedback, and feedback allows correction. The power lies not in never slipping, but in returning to alignment faster each time. This audiobook is meant to be a long companion, something you can return to whenever clarity fades, because growth is not a straight line, it is a rhythm, and having a steady guide helps you maintain balance through the highs and lows. Stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot, because the messages you absorb shape your mindset, and your mindset shapes your life. Choosing supportive content is a quiet but powerful act of self-respect. As this reset continues to unfold, you begin to sense a deeper confidence taking shape. Not the loud kind that needs validation, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you are keeping your word to yourself day after day. Because self-trust is built the same way a life is built, through consistency, patience, and follow-through. You start to realize that most stress is not caused by doing too much, but by doing things that do not align with who you are becoming. And as alignment strengthens, stress naturally decreases, not because life becomes easier, but because your responses become wiser. A focused life is not about eliminating rest or pleasure, it is about choosing them intentionally instead of using them as escapes. Rest becomes recovery, not avoidance, and pleasure becomes renewal, not distraction. And this shift alone transforms how sustainable your progress feels. As 2026 moves forward, you learn to pace yourself, understanding that urgency is rarely required, but consistency always is, and by slowing down just enough to stay present, you avoid the cycle of burnout and restart that keeps so many people stuck. You begin to respect the power of daily rhythms, waking, working, resting, reflecting, simple patterns repeated with care, because rhythm creates stability, and stability creates momentum without force. There will be moments when doubt appears, questioning whether this quiet approach is enough. But remember that the most lasting transformations rarely feel dramatic while they are happening. They feel ordinary, subtle, almost invisible, until one day you look back and realize how far you have come. A reset also invites you to redefine productivity. Productivity becomes about progress on what matters, not activity for the sake of staying busy. And when you let go of busyness, you reclaim mental space, creativity, and calm. You may notice that your patience grows with yourself and with others because patience is a sign of inner stability, and inner stability allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. As this audiobook continues to guide you, allow it to be a steady background presence, reinforcing focus and calm, because repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity makes new habits feel safe. If these words support your journey, remember to stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook spot, because surrounding yourself with consistent, aligned messages strengthens your ability to stay focused long-term. You are building a life that feels intentional, sustainable, and grounded, not rushed, not forced, and not driven by pressure, but by clarity. As this journey continues, you begin to recognize that emotional resilience is one of the most valuable skills you can develop in 2026. Not the absence of emotion, but the ability to move through emotions without being controlled by them. Because resilience allows you to stay steady even when circumstances fluctuate. You learn to pause before reacting, creating space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you regain choice, the choice to respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. And this single habit changes how you experience challenges, relationships, and decisions. A reset also reshapes how you handle uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat, you begin to see it as an open field, full of possibility, because certainty often keeps you small, while uncertainty invites growth, learning, and adaptation. As you listen, you may notice a growing sense of trust in your ability to handle whatever comes, not because you have all the answers, but because you have built the habits and mindset needed to respond effectively, and trust replaces fear when preparation meets presence. You start to release the need to control outcomes, focusing instead on controlling effort, attention, and attitude, because outcomes are influenced by many factors, but your effort and alignment are always within your reach. This reset encourages you to build emotional awareness, noticing what triggers stress, what drains energy, and what restores it, because awareness allows adjustment, and adjustment prevents overwhelm before it takes hold. In 2026, resilience means returning to center again and again after setbacks, after distractions, after unexpected changes, not staying perfectly balanced at all times, but knowing how to recalibrate quickly. You may also notice that your relationships begin to shift, not because others change, but because you change how you show up. Clearer boundaries, calmer communication, and a stronger sense of self create healthier dynamics naturally. As this audiobook continues, let it remind you that strength is not loud or aggressive. It is steady, calm, and grounded, and that kind of strength carries you through challenges without exhausting you. If this message resonates, take a moment to support the Motivational Audiobook spot, because consistent encouragement reinforces consistency in action, and choosing supportive content strengthens your mental environment. As you settle even deeper into this reset, you begin to notice how much power exists in acceptance, not resignation, but a calm acknowledgement of reality as it is, because acceptance removes resistance, and resistance is what drains energy more than effort ever could. You stop fighting where you are and start working with it, understanding that growth does not require perfect conditions. It requires engagement, and by engaging fully with the present moment, you unlock opportunities that were invisible when your attention was scattered. A reset in 2026 also changes how you relate to pressure. Instead of letting pressure push you into urgency, you learn to let it refine your focus. Pressure becomes a signal to simplify, to return to fundamentals, and to rely on systems rather than emotion. You may notice that your patience deepens, not because things slow down, but because your expectations become more realistic, and realistic expectations reduce frustration while increasing consistency. This process teaches you that calm is not something you wait for. It is something you practice through breathing, through presence, through choosing one task at a time instead of many, and calm becomes the environment in which good decisions are made. As you continue listening, your awareness sharpens. You catch yourself earlier when distraction pulls you away, when old habits resurface, and this early awareness allows gentle correction instead of harsh self-criticism. A reset also invites gratitude, not forced positivity, but quiet appreciation for progress, for effort, for moments of clarity, because gratitude anchors you in the present and reinforces motivation without pressure. You begin to see your life as something you are actively shaping, not something that is happening to you, and this shift in perspective restores a sense of agency that fuels confidence and resilience. If this audiobook is supporting your focus and mindset, remember to stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot, because consistent input creates consistent output, and surrounding yourself with aligned messages strengthens your reset. You are not rushing toward an endpoint. You are learning how to live with intention, clarity, and calm, and this way of living becomes its own reward. As you continue this journey, notice how consistency begins to feel natural, not forced, because your mind slowly accepts repetition as the path to mastery. And mastery is not about perfection. It is about showing up over and over, even when enthusiasm fades, even when life feels messy, because the real transformation happens in those quiet, unglamorous moments when no one is watching. You start to understand that momentum is built by the accumulation of small, aligned actions, and each choice you make in favor of focus, discipline, and presence compounds, creating results that feel effortless only after the effort has been applied steadily, patiently, and without drama. This reset is not about speed. It is about precision, about noticing where energy leaks occur, where your attention is diluted, and where habits drift away from alignment, and then gently correcting course, without judgment, without guilt. Because self-compassion does not weaken accountability, it strengthens it, giving you the emotional fuel to maintain direction over months and years, not just days and weeks. Imagine your day structured around what truly matters, with clarity as your compass and discipline as your engine, where each task, each interaction, each decision is a reflection of the person you are becoming, not the person you were yesterday. And in that clarity, you find freedom, because when priorities are aligned, life stops pulling you in multiple directions, and energy that once dissipated on trivialities now flows toward results, growth, and fulfillment. You will notice that old patterns and excuses attempt to reassert themselves, whispering that change is too hard, that effort is too costly, that comfort is safer than growth. But in 2026, you are no longer negotiating with mediocrity. You are no longer waiting for the perfect alignment of circumstances, because you have chosen to lead yourself, to create systems that protect focus, and to honor the person you are becoming, regardless of external conditions. This audiobook guides you to anchor yourself in identity rather than emotion, because identity drives behavior far more reliably than motivation ever could, and by deciding that you are the type of person who respects commitments, protects focus, and prioritizes growth, your choices automatically align, and each aligned choice reinforces the identity, creating a feedback loop that compounds into extraordinary results quietly, steadily, without unnecessary drama or burnout. Every distraction avoided, every deliberate action taken, every moment of reflection builds your resilience, your clarity, and your momentum. Because transformation is not a single event, it is a continuum, a rhythm of decisions that accumulate day after day, week after week, month after month, until the life you once dreamed of is no longer imagined, but lived in real time, with intention and purpose guiding every step. As you listen, remind yourself that this reset is evergreen, not tied to a date, not tied to motivation spikes, but designed to embed habits, mindset, and discipline that last beyond temporary enthusiasm, so that 2026 becomes the first of many years where you operate from clarity, from alignment, and from the power of deliberate action. And in this clarity, you finally feel in control of your direction, your choices, and your destiny. Supporting this journey, take a moment to connect with the Motivational Audiobook spot by subscribing and engaging, because repeated exposure to aligned messages strengthens identity, reinforces focus, and anchors the mindset required for long-term growth. And the more consistent you are in what you consume, the stronger and more resilient your transformation becomes. Every day, you get to choose whether to let the noise dictate your decisions or to create space for thoughtful action. And as you practice this choice consistently, clarity deepens, resistance diminishes, and the pull of old habits weakens. Because what is repeated becomes internalized, and what is internalized becomes effortless, natural, and part of your identity. When you're ready to continue, we will dive deeper into building long-term habits, sustaining focus, strengthening emotional resilience, and protecting the alignment that ensures 2026 is not just another year, but a transformative chapter in your life. As you move deeper into this reset, you start to notice how patience itself becomes a superpower. Not the kind of patience that waits passively for things to happen, but the active, disciplined patience that chooses alignment over instant gratification, that invests energy in actions whose rewards may take time to appear. And in this patience, you discover a new level of control, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are building something meaningful, something durable, something that does not depend on luck or fleeting inspiration. You begin to understand that the small choices you make every day define the trajectory of your life far more than grand, dramatic decisions ever could, and that focusing on the daily, on the repeatable actions, on the systems that guide behavior, is what separates those who consistently grow from those who drift through life waiting for circumstances to change. This reset teaches you to protect your energy with precision, to recognize that not all inputs are equal, that not every conversation, every notification, every obligation deserves your attention, and that saying no is not rejection. It is self-respect. It is choosing the future over the present noise, and it is one of the simplest yet most profound ways to reinforce your new identity. Imagine your life in 2026 structured around intentional energy, where each morning begins with clarity, where your environment silently reinforces your priorities, where every interaction and task is filtered through the lens of alignment, and you notice that stress diminishes, focus deepens, and the sense of momentum becomes almost effortless, because the small daily choices compound invisibly until they manifest as real, tangible results that feel inevitable. You will encounter resistance, of course, from old habits, from internal voices that question your consistency, from fleeting emotions that urge you to retreat to comfort, but resistance is not a signal to stop. It is a signal to stay present, to act in alignment, to practice patience, and to remember that growth always comes with tension, discomfort, and the occasional challenge, because what grows under pressure is what lasts. A reset is not about perfection, it is about deliberate action, repeated consistently, and understanding that every step forward counts, no matter how small, because the trajectory of your life is determined by the accumulation of these intentional choices, not by occasional bursts of effort or dramatic, short-lived motivation. As this audiobook continues, allow yourself to absorb these words not as instructions, but as companions guiding you toward calm, clarity, and purpose. And notice how gradually your mind begins to favor alignment over distraction, focus over fragmentation, and action over hesitation, because repeated exposure to these messages rewires thought patterns, strengthens identity, and quietly shifts behavior toward the person you are becoming. Every habit you reinforce, every boundary you establish, every moment of reflection you take compounds into resilience, self-trust, and momentum. Because transformation is never a single event. It is a series of decisions, each reinforcing the last, each building upon the previous, until the life you once dreamed of is no longer distant, but present, tangible and alive, constructed quietly, steadily, and intentionally. Supporting this process, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot by subscribing, engaging, and allowing these words to anchor your environment with focus, clarity, and alignment. Because what you repeatedly consume becomes the framework through which your life unfolds, and consistent exposure ensures that the principles of this reset are not temporary, but permanent, shaping your actions long after the audiobook ends. You are not chasing a new version of yourself. You are uncovering it layer by layer, habit by habit, choice by choice, and each step, no matter how small, strengthens your identity, reinforces your focus, and compounds into the life you are designing deliberately, with intention, and with calm. As you move further into this reset, you start to realize that consistency is your most reliable ally, far more powerful than motivation, inspiration, or luck, because motivation comes and goes, emotions fluctuate. But the disciplined repetition of aligned actions builds results that feel inevitable over time. And in this realization, you find a sense of relief, a freedom from the exhausting cycle of chasing temporary highs, knowing that true progress is quiet, steady, and cumulative. You begin to notice that life responds to alignment in subtle, almost invisible ways. Opportunities begin to present themselves more clearly. Decisions feel easier, and your energy stabilizes, not because life suddenly became simpler, but because your mind is no longer scattered, your habits no longer conflict with your priorities, and your focus has become a muscle strengthened by repeated practice. A reset in 2026 is not about adding more to your plate, it is about removing what no longer serves you, eliminating what distracts, simplifying routines, and focusing on actions that produce meaningful results over time, because every habit you maintain consistently is a vote for the person you are becoming. And the more votes you cast consciously, the more natural this version of you becomes. You will feel resistance, doubt, and sometimes frustration, because old patterns will attempt to pull you back into comfort, into what is familiar and easy. But this is a natural part of the process, a sign that growth is occurring, and the key is not to fight these moments, but to observe them, act anyway, and continue reinforcing the choices that support your clarity, focus, and long-term vision. Imagine your day structured around purpose, where each hour is aligned with your priorities, where distractions no longer steal your attention, and where your energy is protected and intentionally directed. Because the real power of a reset is in learning how to manage attention, how to protect mental space, and how to make deliberate choices in every moment, no matter how small they seem. A true reset also teaches you to measure progress differently, not by dramatic outcomes or instant results, but by daily actions, by alignment, and by the reinforcement of identity. Because the person who consistently shows up, who protects their focus, and who acts with integrity eventually achieves far more than the person who relies on sporadic effort or fleeting bursts of motivation. As you listen to this audiobook, allow these words to settle into your subconscious, not as pressure, but as guidance, reinforcing habits, shaping mindset, and creating a mental environment where focus, calm, and alignment are natural, automatic, and effortless. And in this environment, your life begins to reflect the clarity and purpose you have cultivated internally. Supporting this reset, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot by subscribing, liking, sharing, and engaging, because repeated exposure to aligned messages strengthens the principles you are integrating, reinforces consistency, and anchors long-term identity change, ensuring that what you are building now does not fade when the initial excitement passes. Every choice you make in alignment, every moment of discipline, every action taken despite resistance, compounds quietly into resilience, momentum, and confidence. And over time, these invisible forces create a life that feels intentional, empowered, and deeply satisfying, not chaotic, reactive, or exhausting. Remember, this is not a temporary shift. It is a lifestyle reset, an ongoing process of refinement, reflection, and reinforcement. And the more you integrate these practices, the more naturally they become part of your identity, your environment, and your daily rhythm. As you settle deeper into this journey, you begin to notice the quiet power of presence, the ability to be fully engaged in each moment without being pulled by past regrets or future worries. Because real transformation does not happen in anticipation or nostalgia, it happens in the space where focus, action, and awareness converge. And this is where 2026 offers its greatest gift: the opportunity to live intentionally, moment by moment. You start to understand that the mind is like a garden, and the thoughts, habits, and patterns you repeat are seeds. Some grow into resilience, clarity, and momentum, while others grow into distraction, anxiety, and stagnation. And a true reset is about choosing carefully which seeds you water daily, understanding that even the smallest consistent action shapes the future in ways that are profound yet subtle. A powerful reset requires you to examine your routines, your environment, and the company you keep, because every input sends a signal to your brain about what you prioritize. And when your surroundings, habits, and influences align with your goals, your energy is naturally preserved, your focus is sharpened, and the life you desire begins to unfold as an inevitable reflection of your internal alignment. You may feel moments of discomfort as you make these shifts, because change challenges the familiar, and the familiar often masquerades as safe even when it limits you. But discomfort is not danger. It is information, a signal that growth is occurring, and learning to move forward in spite of it is what separates those who transform quietly and consistently from those who remain stuck in patterns that no longer serve them. Imagine each day in 2026 anchored in clarity, where the first hour of your morning sets the tone for calm and purposeful action, where distractions are minimized, and where small, deliberate habits compound into momentum that carries you effortlessly through challenges, decisions, and unexpected shifts. Because when your internal systems are aligned, life becomes smoother, energy more abundant, and focus almost automatic. A reset also shifts your relationship with time, teaching you to see every minute as a choice rather than a pressure, every hour as an opportunity to invest rather than to rush, and every day as a framework to build identity, habits, and results that persist. Because time managed with awareness and intention compounds in the same way consistent actions do, eventually producing outcomes that feel extraordinary, yet are rooted in simple daily alignment. As you continue to listen, notice how identity begins to take precedence over motivation. Because motivation is fleeting, but identity drives behavior effortlessly. When you see yourself as the type of person who respects commitments, protects focus, and acts with integrity, your daily choices begin to follow naturally, reinforcing the person you are becoming without requiring constant willpower or external validation. Supporting this process, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot by subscribing, engaging, and revisiting this content regularly, because repeated exposure strengthens neural pathways associated with focus, discipline, and clarity, embedding these principles deeply so that the habits you build now become automatic, effortless, and lasting. Every aligned action, every boundary established, every moment of reflection compounds quietly, building resilience, self-trust, and momentum, until one day you realize that the life you imagined is no longer distant or aspirational. It is present, tangible, and deeply aligned with who you are and who you are becoming. Remember, this is an ongoing journey, not a momentary spike in effort or emotion. Real transformation is the result of patient, deliberate, consistent action repeated over days, weeks, and months, creating compounding results that far exceed what any single burst of energy could achieve. As you continue deeper into this reset, you begin to understand that real progress is often invisible at first. Subtle shifts in thinking, small adjustments in behavior, and incremental choices quietly accumulating. And while the results may not be immediately apparent, the process itself is what guarantees long-term transformation, because what is repeated consistently becomes automatic, and what is automatic eventually defines your life. You start to notice how your attention shapes reality, how each moment you allow distraction or reactive behavior is a moment your energy drifts away from what matters most, and how each deliberate choice to act with intention, to focus fully, and to protect your mental space strengthens not only your habits but your identity, creating a feedback loop where focus begets clarity and clarity fuels consistent action. A reset in 2026 is also about embracing simplicity, not in deprivation, but in intentional reduction, removing the unnecessary, letting go of obligations that drain rather than serve, and clearing space for what truly moves your life forward, because progress does not come from doing more. It comes from doing the right things consistently over time, without rushing or forcing. You will feel internal resistance as you maintain this focus. Old patterns may try to pull you back toward comfort, and fleeting emotions may whisper that change is too hard. But every time you act in alignment despite resistance, you strengthen your resilience, reinforce your identity, and take another step toward a life designed by intention rather than circumstance. Imagine each day flowing with quiet purpose, where mornings are anchored in calm and direction, where actions follow priorities, and where every small habit compounds into the momentum that carries you effortlessly through the complexities of life. Because the architecture of your daily choices determines the trajectory of your future far more than random bursts of inspiration ever could. A reset also teaches you the value of reflection, of checking in with yourself regularly to see what is working, what drains energy, and what needs adjustment. Because awareness is the bridge between intention and action, and without it, even the best laid plans can dissolve under distraction, habit, or impulse. As this audiobook continues, allow these words to become your companion, a quiet guide that reinforces focus, clarity, and resilience. And notice how repeated listening begins to rewire thought patterns, making aligned action feel natural, effortless, and increasingly automatic, until living intentionally is no longer a challenge, but your default state. Supporting this journey, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot by subscribing, engaging, and returning to this audiobook regularly, because consistency in the content you absorb strengthens the habits, identity, and mindset you are cultivating, anchoring the principles of this reset deeply into your daily life. Every choice in alignment, every action taken despite resistance, every moment of reflection compounds quietly into momentum, confidence, and stability, creating a life that is not reactive or chaotic, but deliberate, controlled, and profoundly satisfying, where each day reinforces the identity you are building and the results you are manifesting. Remember, this is not a one-time event. It is a lifestyle reset, an ongoing process of refinement, reinforcement, and deliberate repetition. And as you continue listening, the principles in this audiobook will become increasingly integrated, shaping your choices, your habits, and ultimately, your life in 2026 and beyond. As you move even deeper into this reset, you begin to notice how much power exists in your daily structure, the way each hour is spent, each task approached, and each decision made, because life is the sum of repeated actions, and small intentional choices repeated consistently eventually compound into outcomes that feel inevitable, effortless, and profoundly aligned with your vision. You start to realize that clarity is cultivated, not found, and that each moment you slow down to prioritize, to focus, and to reflect strengthens your ability to make decisions that move you forward instead of sideways. And as clarity grows, distractions lose their grip, chaos begins to fade, and your mind becomes a tool that serves you rather than a space constantly pulled in conflicting directions. A reset in 2026 also requires you to examine your emotional patterns, understanding that how you respond to challenges, setbacks, and stress determines your trajectory far more than the events themselves. And when you choose to respond with patience, awareness, and alignment, you turn obstacles into stepping stones, friction into fuel, and resistance into a signal for growth. You may feel tension as you shift old habits, because the mind resists unfamiliar patterns, even when they serve your highest good. But each time you act in alignment despite discomfort, you reinforce your identity, strengthen your self-trust, and build momentum that compounds quietly, invisibly, yet powerfully over time, creating a life where consistency, not chaos, defines your experience. Imagine your day flowing with purpose, where mornings are calm, focused, and intentional, afternoons productive and aligned, and evenings reflective and restorative, because a life designed this way becomes sustainable, energizing, and profoundly satisfying, allowing you to achieve more with less stress and less wasted energy, and giving you space to grow, create, and contribute meaningfully. A reset also shifts your perception of challenges, teaching you that setbacks are not failures, but data, feedback, and guidance, and that learning to extract the lessons, adjust, and continue moving forward transforms frustration into resilience, doubt into clarity, and struggle into momentum that propels you steadily toward your goals. As this audiobook continues, let these words settle into your subconscious, not as pressure, but as guidance, reinforcing identity, sharpening focus, and nurturing habits that build long-term resilience, because repeated exposure to aligned ideas rewires thinking, strengthens discipline, and makes intentional action increasingly effortless, until alignment becomes the default mode of living. A reset in 2026 also requires you to examine your emotional patterns, understanding that how you respond to challenges, setbacks, and stress determines your trajectory far more than the events themselves, and when you choose to respond with patience, awareness, and alignment, you turn obstacles into stepping stones, friction into fuel, and resistance into a signal for growth. You may feel tension as you shift old habits, because the mind resists unfamiliar patterns, even when they serve your highest good. But each time you act in alignment despite discomfort, you reinforce your identity, strengthen your self-trust, and build momentum that compounds quietly, invisibly, yet powerfully over time, creating a life where consistency, not chaos, defines your experience. Imagine your day flowing with purpose, where mornings are calm, focused, and intentional, afternoons productive and aligned, and evenings reflective and restorative, because a life designed this way becomes sustainable, energizing, and profoundly satisfying, allowing you to achieve more with less stress and less wasted energy, and giving you space to grow, create, and contribute meaningfully. A reset also shifts your perception of challenges, teaching you that setbacks are not failures, but data, feedback, and guidance, and that learning to extract the lessons, adjust, and continue moving forward transforms frustration into resilience, doubt into clarity, and struggle into momentum that propels you steadily toward your goals. As this audiobook continues, let these words settle into your subconscious, not as pressure, but as guidance, reinforcing identity, sharpening focus, and nurturing habits that build long-term resilience, because repeated exposure to aligned ideas rewires thinking, strengthens discipline, and makes intentional action increasingly effortless, until alignment becomes the default mode. As you continue this journey of resetting your life, you begin to notice the subtle yet profound shifts in your energy, your thinking, and your ability to act with intention. Because when you align your thoughts, habits, and environment with your goals, momentum is no longer forced. It becomes natural, effortless, and deeply satisfying, as if the universe itself begins to respond to the clarity you are cultivating within. You start to realize that the pace of change does not matter nearly as much as the consistency of effort, because even small actions, repeated daily, compound quietly into results that feel extraordinary over time, and what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable when discipline, focus, and aligned action are woven into the fabric of each day. A reset in 2026 is not about chasing perfection, nor is it about dramatic leaps forward. It is about reclaiming control over the ordinary, the daily, the repeated, because it is in the consistency of small, purposeful choices, choosing to wake early, to protect focus, to act with integrity, to rest when needed, that true transformation is quietly built and sustained. You may feel impatience or doubt, wondering if these small steps will ever amount to meaningful change, but this is a natural part of the process, a signal that your mind is adjusting, that old patterns are being challenged, and that growth is quietly unfolding beneath the surface, steadily shaping identity, confidence, and long-term results. Imagine each day in 2026 flowing with calm intention, where mornings provide clarity, afternoons offer purpose, and evenings allow reflection and restoration. Because when your life is designed around alignment instead of reaction, your energy is preserved, your focus sharpened, and your progress becomes inevitable, compounding quietly, powerfully, and sustainably. A true reset also transforms how you perceive challenges, setbacks, and resistance, teaching you that obstacles are not barriers but information, signals guiding adjustment, growth, and refinement, and that by responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively, you convert friction into fuel and resistance into momentum that accelerates quietly yet consistently over time. As this audiobook continues, let these words settle into your subconscious, reinforcing habits, sharpening focus, and strengthening self-trust, because repeated exposure to aligned ideas rewires thinking, builds discipline, and makes intentional action feel natural, effortless, and increasingly automatic, until living with clarity, purpose, and momentum becomes your default state. Supporting this transformation, stay connected with the Motivational Audiobook Spot by subscribing, engaging, and revisiting this audiobook regularly, because consistent exposure to high-quality content strengthens mindset, reinforces habits, and ensures that your reset in 2026 is not temporary but deeply rooted, sustainable, and transformative. Every small action in alignment, every moment of deliberate focus, and every choice to stay consistent compounds into confidence, resilience, and clarity, creating a life that feels balanced, intentional, and powerful, because what you repeat daily defines the trajectory of your future far more than any single burst of effort ever could. Remember, this reset is not an event. It is a lifestyle, a practice of ongoing alignment, reflection, and deliberate action. And as you continue integrating these principles, your habits, mindset, and identity reinforce each other, producing outcomes that are inevitable, lasting, and deeply rewarding.